We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
Hello and welcome to WION World as One. You're watching Race to Power with me, Hemkaur Saroya. On the show tonight, the gridlock continues in Washington. Republicans and Democrats continue to clash, but it's the American people bearing the brunt. This as the US enters the second day of its shutdown. We'll discuss this on the show tonight. Also on the show, France is in the grip of protests yet again. As tensions reach a fever pitch, what lies ahead? We'll bring you a report on this as well. Let's get started. Now, starting with the United States, as I mentioned, the US government shutdown, it's entered a second day. But this gridlock continues in Washington. Republicans and Democrats continue to clash, and it is the American people who are bearing the brunt. The partisan wall is growing thicker in the US. Trump is punishing Democrats for a deadlock in the Senate. The White House has slapped Democrat-ruled states with funding cuts. Around $26 billion that was supposed to fund projects in blue states now stand frozen. The funding cuts will most severely hit New York, where $18 billion transit project can be stalled. In 16 other Democrat-ruled states, green energy projects worth $8 billion are on the line as well. And these cuts will hit states like California and Illinois. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, who hails from New York, hit out at Trump. He's accused White House of targeting regular Americans for Republican objectives. Vice President J.D. Vance also doubled down on political rivals. He said that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have shut down the government. He also warned that the administration might sack federal workers if the shutdown lasts more than a few days.
And I think that the Democrats, if they're so worried about the effect this is having on the American people, and they should be, what they should do is reopen the government, not complain about how we respond to the fact that Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have shut down the government in the first place.
Now, around 750,000 federal employees are expected to be placed on a kind of enforced leave, with pay withheld until they return to work. Essential workers such as the military and border agents may be forced to work without pay, and some will likely miss their checks beginning next week. These talks are stuck on healthcare. The Blue Camp is demanding healthcare subsidies for low-income families. The issue that, according to Donald Trump, is raised to give healthcare benefits to illegal immigrants voting in the Senate is now adjourned until Friday, meaning hopes for a quick resolution are dim. Republicans don't have enough numbers in the Senate, and Democrats are using that leverage to further their agenda. In a 100-member Senate, Republicans need 60 votes to get the funding bill through, but they only have 53 seats, 7 less than what is needed. This is where they need Democrats to chip in, but as things stand, neither of the parties is ready to bow down. These types of stalemates are not new at Capitol Hill. Usually, the Senate passes continuing resolutions or short-term funding bill to keep the government open. Republicans are ready to walk down that path, but even after multiple sittings, a short-term Republican spending plan failed to win enough support. With both Republicans and Democrats blaming each other, the shutdown is likely to continue, at least until there is some effort to reach common ground between both the parties. All right, for more on this, Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Susan, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we've been discussing this for the past few days. We were speaking to some experts yesterday as well. We spoke to Mr. Greg Swenson, and we have been speaking to other experts as well. Many of them say that perhaps the requirement at this point is that the Democrats let this bill pass, a clean bill without the added healthcare amendments that they want, and then fight that on their electoral politics. That's where that should come in, and not at this point. Or, of course, the other point is to raise the debt ceiling, Susan. What's your take on this?
Yeah, those are such valid points because we were just hearing from Speaker Johnson right now, and the Republicans proposed a clean bill to keep the government open for 7 weeks until these negotiations continue. However, the Democrats fear that momentum is going to be gone for the things that they're demanding. And ultimately, the reason that the Democrats don't want to do this, many experts believe, is because they can't go to their electorate and say that we want more subsidies, healthcare subsidies for the people that they want. While it's not outright illegal immigrants, but if you look at the bill and it's public, it really provides a lot of healthcare subsidies for asylum seekers, and there are a lot of issues regarding the border as well. That doesn't sit well with the American electorate. The American electorate wanted cut in spending and they wanted immigration reform as well. But they think that if they keep the government open right now, then they're going to lose this momentum. And then there are those Obamacare subsidies that will expire during these 7 weeks. So ultimately, it all comes down to where this money is allocated. The Republicans want it in another way. The Democrats want to continue with the path that they've been going. And that's why we're in this deadlock. But the American people are watching right now. And what they're seeing is that, you know, there could have been this temporary 7-week window as it usually is. And about 20-something Democrats just voted against that. It's not clear how well that will really work out for them, even though they believe that they're fighting for the right causes.
That as an example, because as you mentioned, the American people are watching. Do you think this could somehow prove to be a self-goal for the Democrats in those terms then? Because I was also speaking to another expert who did say that beyond theatrics, it's of course the American people who face the brunt of this. And it's going to be an unpopular choice for either side to let this continue and let this go on for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always the losers are the ordinary American people, especially when even during this shutdown, it's these lawmakers that continue to get paid, and the Senate went on recess until at least tomorrow. So, you know, nothing is going to happen in the short term. Right now, most ordinary Americans may not feel the brunt, but as this drags on further, then you are going to continuously see that, you know, different programs are going to be affected. For example, I'll give you an example. People that were traveling from JFK and LaGuardia airports here, the TSA is working, but they're not getting paid. Supplementary security doesn't exist at airports. There are already long lines just 48 hours in. So programs like this is going to exacerbate maybe food stamp programs, but it all depends how long it takes. But nonetheless, it's not a good look.
Right. All right, Susan, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on this. Of course, we'll track this closely and we'll be in touch with you, of course. All right. So in a significant decision, the US Supreme Court has also blocked Trump's attempt to immediately remove Fed Governor Lisa Cook. The court has deferred action until it hears the case. That's in January 2026, meaning Cook retains her seat at least for now. The Supreme Court issued a brief unsigned order declining to grant the Trump administration's emergency request to oust Cook before full review. The order defers the decision until oral arguments scheduled for January 2026. In effect, Cook stays in her role at the Federal Reserve until the court rules. In August 2025, Trump announced that he would fire Lisa Cook, citing allegations of mortgage fraud involving her property declarations. Cook denied any wrongdoing and is sued to block her removal, arguing the allegations failed, and I'm quoting here, the for-cause standard, which is under the Federal Reserve Act 1913. A U.S. District Judge, Jacob, granted a preliminary injunction preventing removal, finding Cook was likely to succeed on her claims. The Trump administration appealed. A D.C. Circuit Appellate panel refused to lift the injunction in a 2-1 decision. The Federal Reserve Act allows removal of governors only for cause, but never defines exactly what qualifies as for cause. The core legal questions are, first, did Trump deny Lisa Cook her due process rights by moving to remove her without proper notice or a chance to respond? Second here, do the mortgage frauds allegations, which date back to before she joined the Federal Reserve, legally meet the threshold for cause required to fire a Fed governor? So legal scholars see this as a test case for the limits of presidential authority over an independent central bank. Cook will now continue participating in the remaining Fed meetings in 2025, including the October 28-29 meeting. Trump's push to replace her could have given him greater influence over the Federal Open Market Committee, that's the FOMC, and monetary policy direction. A group of 18 former Fed and Treasury leaders filed a friend of court brief warning that allowing the removal would undermine the Fed's credibility and independence. The DOJ argued that removal will not harm markets, while Cook's legal team warned that even a temporary removal could send a signal of political instability. Oral arguments are set for January, as I mentioned earlier, 2026. After that, the Supreme Court will issue a full ruling determining whether a president can remove a Fed governor under all these circumstances. The outcome could reshape the balance of power between the executive and the Federal Reserve, affecting future presidential control over monetary institutions as well. And France is on the boil. Protests have erupted across the country. Thousands of people are on the streets demonstrating at a time when France does not even have a government. In Nantes, protests unfolded over demands to scrap the budget cuts. Unions are rallying for higher tax on France's wealthy and a reversal of existing state pension policies, which many deem are not enough. Similar protests have unfolded in Lyon, where members of an inter-union coalition, as well as its supporters, have taken to the streets demanding social justice measures from President Macron and the newly appointed Prime Minister. The streets of Paris were taken over by thousands marching in support of pro-union demonstrations, demanding a reversal of austerity measures. Authorities have deployed thousands of security personnel across the country to monitor law and order.
This is therefore the third day that our law enforcement agencies will be mobilized throughout France, and not just in the Paris region. We will see what happens with regard to the demonstration and the mobilization, since there are around 250 processions and 250 marches planned across the country.
Now, the nationwide protests come at a time when there is a political void in France. Macron and the new Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, are yet to appoint a cabinet. At a time like this, union workers are urging the leadership to rethink budget cuts, which the government proposed as a measure to control France's fiscal health. But the measures have deeply impacted public services, triggering anger across the country. And this is what protesters who are participating in rallies across France have to say. Listen to this.
We know that decisions on the budget are currently being made. We do not want to just be witnesses. We do not want this to result in political deals behind the backs of the workers. That's why it's important for many of us to protest and strike today to make our social demands heard.
3 journées de grève et de manifestation.
Je suis là pour défendre mes droits.
I'm here to defend my rights, I'm here to make my voice heard, and I'm also here to express my dissatisfaction with the government's policies and the decisions being made regarding workers, pensioners, and students.
We must continue the fight, even if there are clearly not many of us. We must continue. It costs us a day each time. But hey, that's how democracy normally advances.
It shows a mobilization of the youth awakening in universities and high schools. For us, it is very important to show this. In conjunction with the workers, we can build a large-scale mobilization against the government, but also, as we said, by massively politicizing this movement beyond just austerity and budget questions.
And youth across countries leading anti-government movements, putting authorities on a corruption watch and demanding a systemic overhaul. The countries under spotlight today are Morocco and Serbia. In Morocco's Saleh town, protests turned volatile, with demonstrators setting financial institutions on fire. Visuals showed charred and damaged buildings after protesters set banks ablaze, looted shops and torched police cars. The anger is against lack of government funding for schools and hospitals as the government diverts billions for World Cup preparations. These are the visuals from the night prior, showing vehicles and public properties set ablaze as anti-corruption protests intensify in the country. The movement is being led by an anonymous youth group that calls itself Gen Z 212. In the past few days of demonstrations, 2 have died and thousands have been injured. Morocco's Interior Ministry said that 409 have been arrested since protests began on Saturday. Now moving on to Serbia, there's anger against government corruption over a months-old issue. Thousands gathered in the capital as protests continue in response to a fatal roof collapse 11 months ago.
So, the essence of these protests and these changes is the desire to change the political system, to end the simulation of a democratic system. Until now, with our president, we have only been simulating democracy. It is finally time to separate the executive, legislative, judicial and prosecutorial branches of power, which is what we are insisting on.
Now, protesters blame the Serbian government and corruption for the disaster which killed 16 people. At the ongoing demonstrations led by university students, thousands have called for early elections in the country. Now, Turkey's opposition has made a new accusation at President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and the ruling party. That's the opposition. CHP says the ruling party is pressuring its officials to defect. CHP, or the Republican People's Party, is the main political rival of Erdogan. For months, CHP's top leaders have been under crackdown from the ruling party, which they allege are politically motivated strikes by Erdogan. This crackdown against CHP began after the opposition party won local elections last year, in a major setback to the Turkish president. The CHP says this tactic by the AKP is part of a broader intimidation campaign which they claim began last year. Ever since, 11 of its 26 mayors in Istanbul belonging to the opposition party have been arrested, one after the other, and the allegations on all these leaders are the same: terror, ties or graft. The most recent and prominent incident was the arrest of former Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, who incidentally was also the rival party's presidential candidate for upcoming elections. İmamoğlu was arrested in March this year. The move triggered massive protests on the streets of Istanbul. Now, in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, people are protesting against the Pakistani government. At least 15, including 3 police personnel, have been killed and over 200 injured as demonstrations escalate and turn violent. According to the Joint Awami Action Committee, which is leading these protests, it's called the police action a gross violation of human rights. 12 of its members have been killed during the ongoing demonstrations. The fatalities include 5 in Muzaffarabad, 5 in Dhirkot and 2 in Mirpur. More than 200 others have been injured, many critically. Most of the wounded are said to have sustained gunshot injuries amid clashes with security forces. Now, the violence marks a severe escalation in the region's unrest, which has been driven by widespread anger over the denial of basic rights. Protesters clashed with authorities, hurling stones and pushing large shipping containers placed on bridges to block their march towards Muzaffarabad into the river. The Joint Awami Action Committee blamed the deaths of its members in Muzaffarabad on firing by the Pakistan Rangers, while the remaining fatalities, they said, were caused by heavy shelling by Pakistani security forces, including the army, during crackdowns on civilian protesters.
They call it Azad Kashmir, but the reality is that people have no freedom here. This government has turned into a demon. It is now killing its own people. They want to silence us by shutting down the media, deploying forces and opening fire on us. With our voices suppressed, what are we supposed to do?
Now, Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif expressed concerns about the situation in POK. He called on protesters to refrain from causing disturbance to public order. Shehbaz Sharif also ordered a negotiating committee to solve this issue. Now, the unrest has brought the region to a standstill, with markets, shops, businesses and transport services completely shut down. POK Prime Minister Chaudhry Anwarul Haq and Federal Minister for Parliamentary Affairs Tariq Fazil Chaudhry extended an invitation to the Joint Awami Action Committee for dialogue in an effort to claim the ongoing unrest in the region. A 3-day shutdown strike was announced after talks with the government and federal ministers collapsed last week over issues including elite privileges and reserved seats for refugees. Meanwhile, a British parliamentary group has written to the UK Foreign Office expressing serious concerns about the escalating situation and communications blackout in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, noting that the blackout has caused significant anxiety among his constituents with family in the region. Now, Japan is going through a period of political uncertainty. The ruling party is holding a leadership race to replace incumbent Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. And on the other hand, a new right-wing conservative force is gaining momentum. Sansieto, a party that came into existence just over 5 years ago, is growing by leaps and bounds in Japan. Betting on a conservative playbook, Sansieto is garnering support on its anti-immigration policy. Hundreds of party supporters gathered in Tokyo to protest against Japan's rising immigration population. The opposition comes at a time when Japan is witnessing a record surge of foreign workers.
Sanseito gains its popularity because we say the obvious in an obvious way. Let's do the politics that people are asking for. That is what I call Japanese first. The total opposite to Japanese first is globalism first, caring too much for what has been decided somewhere out there and how foreign companies will benefit has brought the decline in economics and population in Japan, which lead to the foreign workers' crisis.
Now, his supporters echo the same sentiment. They see cheap labor as a threat to Japanese population and accuse them of not doing enough to learn Japanese way of life.
Foreigners who have come to Japan recently have no respect for the country but came as cheap labor. I don't believe they bring any good to Japan, and that's why I agree to most of the things Kamiya says. I support him and the party.
Most of the support base of Sanseito is 18 to 39-year-olds. According to the latest poll by Japan Broadcasting Corporation, 16% of Japan's youth voters back the right-wing party, and that's more than 5 points above ruling Liberal Democrats, who lead the chart when it comes to overall voting preferences. Looking at the rise of Sanseito, Liberal Democrats are also following suit. All 5 candidates competing in LDP leadership race have vowed tougher measures on foreigners. The candidate who wins LDP leadership race will be their candidate for Prime Minister in Parliament. But the House remains fractured, and so are opposition parties. The new LDP leader is most likely to take the baton from Ishiba, and challenge is not just steering through looming deadlock in Parliament, but it's also to regain the lost popularity of the party. Now, Britain is expected to announce the next Archbishop of Canterbury, with 2 women among the favourites to lead the Church of England. Bishop Rachel Trevick and Bishop Louis-Francois Decani are among the frontrunners to potentially become the first female leaders to lead the Church of England. And if elected, they will become the symbolic figureheads for 85 million Anglicans worldwide. But what more do we know about these contenders? While Trevick is Church of England's first ever female diocesan bishop, Iranian descent Bishop Frances Decani came to Britain as a refugee with her parents following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. She's also known for being politically outspoken. Also on the list is Reverend Dame Sarah Mullally, the Bishop of London, who is the former Chief Nursing Officer at the Department for Health. The 106th Archbishop will replace Justin Welby, who resigned last November over a child abuse cover-up scandal. The decision of electing a church leader is pivotal and follows a rather complex vetting process, highlighting ongoing debates over gender roles and homosexuality within the church. Some conservative Anglicans have historically opposed women bishops in church. Another major challenge is balancing expectations between conservative Christians in African countries, where homosexuality is outlawed in some nations and their generally more liberal counterparts in the West have proven a difficult task for previous office holders. Appointing a woman archbishop could compound that as well. And with that, we call a wrap on this edition of Race to Power. News and updates will continue on the other side on WION World is One. Stay tuned.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
So today is a historic day for peace, and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
If Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, then Israel will finish the job by itself.
Israel would have my full backing to finish the job.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing